Liam sat alone in his small apartment, fingers gently tracing the worn keys of his old piano. He couldn't see the faded paint on the walls or the soft glow of the evening sun filtering through the window, but he could feel the warmth on his face. To him, music was more than just notes and chords. It was a lifeline, a language that transcended his dark, sightless world. Born blind, Liam had always known a world without color or light. His childhood was filled with the sound of whispered concerns from well-meaning family members, the hesitant footsteps of visitors unsure how to approach a boy who couldn't see them, and the endless assumptions that he would never amount to much. People often viewed him with pity, assuming that his life must be defined by his disability. But Liam never let the darkness define him. As a child, his mother had placed his tiny hands on the ivory keys of the piano, and the vibrations of the notes had sparked something deep within him. He quickly developed a passion for music, finding comfort and freedom in the way each note resonated through his fingertips. While other kids ran and played outside, Liam would sit for hours at the piano, letting the melodies transport him to worlds he could only imagine. Yet, despite his love for music, the world around him remained harsh. He heard the whispers at school, the kids who said he'd never have a normal life, the teachers who lowered their expectations, and even the strangers who offered hollow, sympathetic words when they saw him being led down the street. For every person who encouraged him, it felt like there were 10 others who doubted his potential. As he grew older, Liam's dreams of becoming a singer only grew stronger. He wanted to share his voice with the world, to show others that his blindness didn't define his abilities. But the road was tough. Music was a fiercely competitive world, and it was hard enough for those with perfect vision. For someone like Liam, it seemed almost impossible. One cold winter evening, as Liam was practicing alone, he heard about a talent show coming to his city. It was one of the biggest platforms for aspiring artists, known for discovering raw, unheard voices. The idea of performing in front of a live audience, let alone a panel of celebrity judges, felt both thrilling and terrifying. He hesitated. The fear of being rejected, of being judged not just for his voice but for his disability, threatened to crush his dreams before they even had a chance to soar. But something inside him refused to stay silent. That night, Liam sat at his piano, his fingers dancing over the keys as his voice filled the small apartment. The walls around him seemed to echo his dreams, amplifying his resolve. He realized that if he didn't take this chance, he would always wonder what might have been. With his heart pounding, Liam submitted his application. Days turned into weeks, and just as his nerves reached their peak, he received a phone call. He had made it to the first round. He would get the chance to stand on that stage, to prove himself not just as a blind man, but as an artist with a voice that demanded to be heard. The days leading up to performance were a blur of preparation and self-doubt. Liam practiced tirelessly, pouring his heart into every note. He knew he couldn't see the audience, couldn't gauge their reactions with glance, but he hoped they would feel his passion, his years of longing, and the dreams he had carefully built note by note. Finally, the day arrived. Standing backstage, Liam could hear the distant roar of the crowd, the buzz of excitement as each contestant took their turn in the spotlight. His heart raced, palms damp as he clutched the handle of his cane. He felt the stage beneath his feet, the subtle vibrations of the floor as the crowd shifted in their seats, and the cool draft from the air conditioning brushing against his face. A stagehand gently guided him to the center of the stage, whispering a quick, encouraging word before retreating into the darkness. The spotlight was on him. He couldn't see it, but he could feel its heat, its weight. For a brief moment, the crowd fell silent, and he felt their collective breath, a sea of strangers waiting to judge him. Liam took a deep breath, his fingers tightening around the microphone. He had come too far to back down now. With his heart in his throat, he began to sing, his voice trembling at first, but quickly finding its strength. The notes flowed from him, each one a testament to the years of struggle, the countless hours spent in solitude and the quiet, unyielding hope that his voice might one day reach the world. As he sang, the audience leaned in, their initial skepticism melting away with each powerful note. Liam's voice soared, raw and full of emotion, filling the massive theater with a warmth that no spotlight could match. In that moment, he wasn't just a blind man on a stage. He was an artist, a dreamer, a force of nature that demanded to be heard. When the final note echoed to the hall and faded into silence, there was a heartbeat of stillness. Then, the crowd erupted into applause, a wave of sound that washed over Liam like the tide, bringing tears to his eyes. He couldn't see their faces, but he felt their approval, their awe, their newfound respect. In that moment, he had shattered every expectation, every doubt, every whispered limitation that had ever held him back. Liam bowed his head, a humble, grateful gesture, as the applause thundered around him. He had found his spotlight, not despite his blindness, but because of it. He had proven that true vision doesn't come from the eyes, but from the heart. As the applause from his first audition slowly faded, Liam felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had done it. He had taken the first step onto the stage, defying the odds and proving that his voice deserved to be heard. But as the days passed and the buzz of his performance spread, so did the whispers. Not everyone believed in his potential. Some questioned whether a blind singer could ever truly stand out in a world so focused on image and spectacle. Liam had grown up surrounded by these whispers. He remembered the conversations he wasn't meant to hear, the hushed tones of teachers who doubted his ability to keep up in class, the uncertain sighs of neighbors who wondered if he'd ever live independently. Even some well-meaning family members had gently tried to steer him toward a quieter, less ambitious life, suggesting he find comfort in the familiar rather than reaching for the impossible. But for Liam, music was never just a dream. It was a necessity, a heartbeat that pulsed through his veins, giving him purpose in a world without sight. Every time his fingers danced across the worn keys of his old piano, he felt the weight of those doubts dissolve, replaced by the pure, unfiltered joy of creation. Yet, the path to the spotlight was not without its shadows. As the competition progressed, Liam found himself struggling with more than just his disability. The pressure of the stage, the fear of letting down those who believed in him, and the ever-present doubt that perhaps the world wasn't ready to truly accept a blind artist, all weighed heavily on his heart. Late one evening, after a particularly grueling rehearsal, Liam sat alone in his apartment, his hands resting on the keys of his piano. The room was silent except for the distant hum of the city outside, a low, unending murmur that seemed to echo his own racing thoughts. He felt the cool, familiar touch of the ivory beneath his fingers, but for the first time in a long while, he hesitated. "What if they're right?" he whispered to the empty room, his voice trembling in the darkness. "What if this is just a foolish dream?" Memories of his childhood flooded back. The taunts from kids at school, the cautious words of his teachers, the awkward silences at family gatherings when someone asked about his future. He had spent his entire life proving himself, but in this moment, alone in the dim glow of the streetlights filtering through his window, those old doubts returned, sharper than ever. Then, without thinking, Liam let his fingers fall, striking a low, resonant chord that vibrated through his entire body. The sound filled the room, a deep, comforting presence that seemed to speak to him, reminding him of every note he had ever played, every song he had ever sung. Slowly, his hands began to move, coaxing the familiar, haunting melody of his favorite piece from the piano's tired strings. As he played, the doubts that had clung to him like shadows slowly began to melt away. He could feel the music rising, building into a crescendo that echoed through his small apartment, filling every corner with the sound of his defiance. This was his voice, his unspoken declaration that he would not be defined by what he lacked, but by the passion and purpose that burned within him. By the time the final note faded into night, Liam felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, filled with critics and skeptics, but he also knew that he had something far more powerful than their doubts. He had his music, his voice, and a dream that no darkness could extinguish. The next morning, Liam woke with a new resolve. He practiced harder, sang louder, and poured every ounce of his soul into his preparations for the next round. The whispers of doubt still lingered, but now they were nothing more than background noise, drowned out by the roar of his own determination. As he stepped onto the stage for his next performance, the spotlight once again warming his face, Liam took a deep breath, his heart steady, his mind clear. He had already defied the odds just by being here, by daring to dream in a world that had tried to convince him he had no right to. Now it was time to prove, once and for all, that his voice was more than just a song. It was a statement, a battle cry, a reminder to anyone who had ever felt small or overlooked that their dreams, too, could rise above the shadows. The night of the big performance had arrived, and the air backstage was electric. The nervous energy of dozens of hopeful contestants buzzed through the narrow hallways, mixing with the sharp scent of stage makeup and the faint hum of equipment. Liam sat in a quiet corner, his cane resting beside him, fingers gently tapping a rhythm against his thigh. His heart raced, each beat echoing the tempo of the song he had rehearsed endlessly in his small apartment. For Liam, this wasn't just another performance. It was a culmination of years spent defying the odds, pushing through self-doubt, and proving that his blindness was not a barrier but a source of strength. He had come too far to turn back now, too invested to let fear steal this moment from him. A stagehand approached, gently tapping his shoulder to signal that his turn was coming up. Liam stood, his fingers tightening around the cool, familiar handle of his cane. He took a deep breath, feeling the rush of adrenaline sharpen his senses. The sound of muffled applause drifted through the heavy curtain, signaling the end of the previous act. It was almost his time. As the stagehand guided him toward the entrance, Liam felt the subtle shift in the air, the cool draft of the air conditioning mixing with the warm, blinding heat of the stage lights just beyond the curtain. He could hear the muffled voices of the judges, the rustle of the audience settling back into their seats, the faint buzz of a microphone being adjusted. Every sound felt magnified, 1,000 tiny signals reminding him that the world was watching. The moment finally arrived. The stagehand whispered a quick, encouraging word before stepping back, leaving Liam alone at the edge of the spotlight. He took a step forward, feeling the polish of the stage beneath his feet, the vibration of the crowd's collective breath as they waited, expectant and curious. The spotlight hit him, a burst of warmth and pressure that he couldn't see but could feel with every fiber of his being. The audience, momentarily taken aback by the sight of the young blind man standing alone on the massive stage, fell into a tense, uncertain silence. He could sense their skepticism, their quiet, unspoken doubts hanging in the air like a thick fog. For a heartbeat, Liam felt the weight of that silence, the crushing pressure of their expectations, the fear that he might falter, might confirm every whispered doubt they had ever harbored. His fingers tightened around the microphone, and for a moment he felt the familiar surge of panic, the same fear that had almost kept him from auditioning in the first place. But then he remembered the countless nights spent practicing, the silent conversations with his piano, the unspoken promises he had made to himself never to let fear define his life. He took a deep breath, letting the air fill his lungs, grounding him, and then he began to sing. The first note hung in the air, clear and pure, cutting through the silence like a beam of light through the darkness. The crowd, caught off guard by the strength and clarity of his voice, collectively leaned in, their skepticism melting into surprise. Liam could feel the shift, the subtle change in the room as his voice reached out, wrapped around each listener, pulling them into his world. As the song continued, his confidence grew. His voice, rich and full of emotion, rose and fell like the tide, carrying the hopes, fears, and dreams of a lifetime spent fighting to be heard. He couldn't see the audience's faces, but he could feel their energy, the sharp intake of breath as he hit a particularly powerful note, the scattered murmurs of disbelief, the soft, unmistakable sound of someone stifling a sob in the front row. By the time he reached the final chorus, the room felt electric, alive with the unspoken connection between performer and his audience. He poured every ounce of his soul into the final notes, letting his voice soar, free and unrestrained, a declaration to the world that he would not be silenced. As the last note faded into the darkness, Liam felt the silence close in once more, but this time it was different. Not the cold, judgmental quiet of strangers, but the stunned, breathless pause of an audience too moved to speak. Then, as if a dam had broken, the theater erupted in applause, a thunderous, overwhelming wave of sound that washed over him, filling every corner of the massive hall. Liam stood there, his chest heaving, his heart racing, as the sound enveloped him. He couldn't see their faces, but he could feel their admiration, their respect, their newfound understanding of who he truly was. Bowing his head in gratitude, Liam whispered a silent thank you to the darkness that had shaped him, the music that had saved him, and the dream that had brought him here. In that moment, he knew that he had truly found his voice. As the echoes of applause faded and the stage lights dimmed, Liam made his way back to the wings, his heart still pounding with the rush of his performance. His ears rang with the lingering roar of the audience, their cheers a stark contrast to the quiet, uncertain footsteps he had taken onto the stage just moments before. The energy of the crowd clung to him like a second skin, electric and invigorating, but also overwhelming. Backstage, a crew member gently took his arm, guiding him away from the blinding heat of the spotlight. Liam's mind raced, replaying every note, every breath, every heartbeat that had filled the cavernous theater just moments ago. He felt a mix of relief and disbelief. He had done it. He had truly faced his fears, and for the first time, he felt he had shattered the invisible chains that had held him back for so long. As he found his way to the small, crowded green room, other contestants looked up, some offering brief nods of respect, others clapping him on the back as he passed. He couldn't see their faces, but he felt the shift in their energy, the quiet, unspoken acknowledgement that he had proven himself, that he had stepped onto that stage and claimed his moment. Liam took a seat, leaning back against the cool, painted cinder-block wall, his chest still heaving, his fingers trembling slightly from the adrenaline that still coursed through his veins. He felt his cane resting beside him, a comforting, grounding presence in a world that had just been turned upside down. He reached for his phone, his fingers finding the familiar, worn edges of the device, and hesitated for a moment before unlocking it. He had missed several calls, and his voicemail box was filled with messages from his mother, his sister, even a few old friends who had caught wind of his performance. But one notification stood out among the rest, a message from a stranger, someone he had never met, but whose words would soon change his life forever. "Hey, Liam, I just saw your performance, and I have to say, you inspired me. I've always been scared to chase my own dreams, always worried about what others might say or think. But watching you up there, pouring your heart out on that stage, reminded me that it's okay to be afraid, as long as you keep moving forward. Thank you for that. Keep shining." Liam felt a lump form in his throat, his fingers tightening around the phone as the words sank in. For so long, he had believed that his music was his alone, a private, personal refuge from the world's harsh realities. But this message, this simple, heartfelt note from a stranger, shattered that belief, revealing a truth he had only just begun to understand. His voice had power, his story had reach, and his dream had the potential to touch lives far beyond the walls of his small apartment. As he sat there, the sounds of the bustling green room fading into the background, Liam felt the weight of that realization settle over him, both terrifying and exhilarating. He had always dreamed of sharing his music with the world, but now he understood that the real gift wasn't just in the notes he sang, but in the connection he created with others, the way his voice could break through the darkness, offering comfort, hope, and inspiration to those who needed it most. In that moment, Liam made a silent promise to himself that he would continue to fight, to sing, to push through every barrier that life threw his way, not just for himself, but for every person who had ever felt unseen, unheard, or underestimated. He would carry their hopes with him, using his voice not just as a tool of expression, but as a beacon of resilience and strength. As he stood to leave, the sound of the next contestant's performance drifting through the walls, Liam felt a new sense of purpose settling in his heart. He had found his voice, not just as a singer, but as a symbol of hope for others. And as he stepped back into the crowded hallway, his cane tapping lightly against the worn, scuffed floor, he knew that his journey was only just beginning. Months had passed since that night. The night Liam had stepped onto the stage, poured his heart into a microphone, and shattered the doubts that had once held him captive. His performance had gone viral, spreading like wildfire across social media, capturing the hearts of millions who had found themselves moved by the blind singer with a powerful voice and unbreakable spirit. The messages continued to pour in, filling his inbox and flooding his social media profiles. People from all walks of life reached out, some inspired by his courage, others simply touched by his raw, unfiltered talent. Liam found himself at the center of a movement, a symbol of perseverance and hope for those who had once felt invisible, unheard, or underestimated. Despite the newfound attention, Liam remained grounded, his feet firmly planted on the path that had brought him this far. He continued to rehearse daily, pushing himself to reach new heights, to expand his vocal range and to refine his craft. Music had always been his refuge, his sanctuary in a world defined by shadows, and he refused to let the bright lights of fame distract him from that simple, unshakable truth. One morning, as he sat at his piano, fingers gently brushing the familiar, worn keys, his phone vibrated on the polished surface beside him. He reached for it, his fingers navigating the screen with practiced ease, and opened a message that had just arrived. Dear Liam, my name is Sarah, and I am a teacher at a school for visually impaired children. I want to take a moment to thank you for being a source of inspiration to my students. They have watched your performance countless times, singing along with every note, their eyes shining with a new sense of possibility. You have shown them that their dreams are not just whispers in the dark, but powerful, tangible goals worth fighting for. Thank you for giving them hope. Liam felt a lump rise in his throat, his fingers trembling slightly as he reread the message. For a moment, he sat in silence, letting the words wash over him, the weight of their meaning settling deep in his heart. He had always dreamed of making a difference, of using his music to connect with others, but this was something more profound than he had ever imagined. Suddenly, he felt a powerful urge to do something more, to give back to the community that had embraced him, that had lifted him up when he needed it most. He thought of the countless children, teenagers, and adults who had reached out to him, their words filled with gratitude and hope, and realized that his journey was no longer just about proving his own worth. It was about empowering others to find their voices as well. Over the next few weeks, Liam began reaching out to organizations that supported visually impaired musicians, offering to mentor young artists and speak at schools like the one Sarah taught at. He recorded personalized messages for children struggling to find their confidence, sharing his own experiences with doubt and fear, reminding them that their voices, too, deserved to be heard. He even hosted a series of virtual concerts, inviting young, aspiring blind musicians to share a stage. Their voices blended with his in a powerful, unifying chorus that echoed across the world, reaching homes, hearts, and minds far beyond the reach of a single stage. As the months turned into years, Liam's influence continued to grow, his story becoming a beacon of hope for those who had once felt lost in the darkness. He released his first album, a deeply personal collection of songs that spoke to the trials and triumphs of his journey, each track a reminder that every voice, no matter how small or overlooked, has the power to change the world. And though the lights grew brighter, the stages larger, and the applause louder, Liam never forgot the quiet, unassuming apartment where his journey had begun, where the whispers of doubt had once echoed against the walls, only to be drowned out by the sound of his own unwavering voice. Because for Liam, the real victory was never in the fame or the fortune, but in the simple, undeniable truth that he had found his purpose, and that his voice, born from the darkness, now echoed with a light that could never be extinguished.